Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my top 36 running back rankings and tiers for week number 3 of the 2024 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton if you guys want my updated rankings and tiers for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, and defense. They're updated every single week on my Patreon for $7.50. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 3 top 36 running back rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with the first tier at the running back position for week number 3, and this tier is called the no-brainer running back ones. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, a genius, to figure out that you want all of these guys in your lineup. First up, we have Bijan Robinson going up against the Kansas City Chiefs at home in Hotlanta on Sunday Night Football. Now, Bijan Robinson, in terms of putting up a crazy fantasy football performance, has not done that yet, but Bijan Robinson has been very consistent through the start of the season. I'm not magically going to change my mind on Bijan because he hasn't ripped off a 30-plus point performance or anything yet. I do believe this will be his best game yet. I believe this game has the makings of a potentially high-scoring game in which Bijan will be incredibly involved. At number 2, we have Alvin Kamara going up against the Philadelphia Eagles at home in New Orleans. Back-to-back games inside of the top 6 for Alvin Kamara, and there is no reason to believe that the guy is going to slow down, despite the fact that last year he was about as efficient as using a fucking Snickers bar wrapper as a condom. This season, he has been a lot more efficient, averaging 5.7 yards per carry, and has been catching a decent amount of passes as well. 5 total touchdowns so far on the season. I feel as though he is a stone cold lock to get another one in this game. There's really not a lot to say about Alvin Kamara. The guy has been downright incredible. Regardless of the matchup, you are going to start him. At number 3, we got Saquon Barkley going up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. Now, Saquon Barkley did let the game fall between his fingertips up against the Falcons as he dropped the pass, but when push comes to shove, despite that catastrophic drop, Saquon Barkley has been a top 10 running back in both games. Saquon Barkley is incredibly involved in one of the best offenses with one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. There is no reason to even sit here giving these guys the Gawk Gawk 9000 special because we know how great these guys are. At number 4, we got Breece Hall going up against the Patriots tonight at home in MetLife. Running back 4 last week, 13 in week number 1. Even in week number 1, when the 49ers hit the Jets with the 619 Rey Mysterio, Breece Hall still put up a solid performance. This game up against the Patriots, I feel as though is going to be low scoring. It's not going to be one of those rock'em sock'em robots, high scoring back and forth affair. This is going to be a chess match, and I believe that Breece Hall will be very involved in the game plan here. He feels like a lock to be a top 6 back. Next up, we move to Jordan, the numbers Mason. What do they mean of the San Francisco 49ers going up against the LA Rams in LA? The LA Rams defense doesn't put an ounce of fear into my eyes. We just saw Kyler Murray, Trey McBride, and Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely dick them down last week. James Conner had a good game as well. That defense is not looking the best. Their offense is down tremendous. I think the 49ers are going to be up big in this game, able to run the rock late with Jordan Mason, and they really don't even use a running back too, so Jordan Mason is going to see a ton of touches here, back-to-back weeks with a touchdown, and I believe he does score again. Final guy inside of the S tier is Devon Achane, running back of the Miami Dolphins, going up against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Seahawks have one of the more underrated defenses in the NFL, and the loss of Tua Tagovailoa will definitely be felt by this offense, but I do think the game plan of the offense without Tua while he's on the IR is going to run on Achane. America runs on Duncan, and the Dolphins offense is going to run on dumping the ball off to Devon Achane, getting him out in space a ton, game in and game out. Again, on paper, this matchup isn't the most ideal, but Achane has been a top 3 running back in back-to-back games, and while I am a little bit scared as a Dolphins fan because Skylar Thompson simply is not that guy, pal, I still think Achane will put up a solid performance. Next up, we move into the slightly lower tier, no-brainer running back ones. These are all guys that you are also going to start. You don't even have to think twice about it, but they are a little bit lower in terms of tiering, which is why I put them in a different tier. Next up, we get Jahmyr Gibbs going up against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. This is another one of those matchups that I feel as though is going to be very, very high scoring. Even with the high involvement of David Montgomery in this offense, Jahmyr Gibbs has still been incredibly efficient for fantasy football. Running back number 10 last week, and I feel as though he's going to put up something similar this week. I do think, though, the Detroit Lions offense will look better as they haven't really looked great through the first 2 weeks of the season, and the matchup up against the Cardinals defense is A1 like the steak sauce. Next up, we move to Jonathan Taylor going up against the Chicago Bears. Now, Jonathan Taylor has definitely been a bit of a letdown this season. He comes out the gate as the running back 30 last week, the running back number 17, which obviously isn't the best based upon the fact that you drafted him more than likely as a top 5 running back. This week up against the Bears defense, I do believe that Jonathan Taylor could have a very solid showing here. We saw that back in week number 1, the Chicago Bears defense got plowed by Tony Pollard, and Jonathan Taylor's better than Tony Pollard, so he should be able to put up his first top 10 game on the season. Next up, we got James Let Him Cook of the Buffalo Bills going up against the Jaguars. Now, this matchup isn't going to be as easy as the Miami Dolphins defense, as the Dolphins defense cannot stop a nosebleed. I've been talking about this for years, regardless of who they plug in those defensive positions, whoever the fucking defensive coordinator is, whether it's Vic Fangio, now Weaver, it doesn't fucking matter. They simply just get a train ran on them every single week. And James Cook did exactly that. 11 carries for 78 yards, 17 receiving yards, and 3 fucking touchdowns as the running back number 3. I don't think he's going to have that much success up against the Jaguars, but they do love to use James Cook. He should be able to see, I believe, in this game, 18 plus touches, maybe even 20 plus carries, plus a couple of targets once they ended up getting rid of their offensive coordinator halfway through last year. The greatness of James Cook has been truly unlocked. Now, he is still a guy that's a bit allergic to the end zone. I know he scored 3 touchdowns last week, but hopefully he ends up getting the monkey off the back now. Is going to end up being a guy that scores a lot more often. And again, while the matchup up against the Jaguars isn't some soft matchup, I actually think the Jaguars defense is very good against the run. I'm just going to believe in James Cook and not bury him too much. Next up, we got Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Tennessee Titans. He was limited in practice yesterday, so that is something to monitor. Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet practices in back-to-back days. Will he play to be or not to be? I'm not sure. Now, realistically, you're playing up against the Titans. You're playing up against Will Levis. So why risk a re-injury? You got a Malik Willis revenge game here. I wouldn't risk playing Jordan Love, but maybe the team ends up thinking differently. If the team goes with Jordan Love, I think they are still going to run a similar game plan, which is just run the ever-living shit out of the ball, because you don't want Jordan Love dropping back a ton, putting himself in dangerous situations. But again, I do believe it will be Malik Willis, and the game plan last week was give Josh Jacobs the ball every single fucking play, 32 carries for 151 yards. Now, he didn't end up finding the end zone last week, which was rough because he only finished as the running back 23, but up against the Titans defense that just got Eiffel Towered by Breece Hall and Braylon Allen, I think Jacobs should be able to find the end zone in this game. Next up, we got James Conner going up against the Detroit Lions. Now, on paper, this is a matchup that isn't the best, and we've made this joke a million times, but when James Conner is healthy, it is death taxes James Conner top 12 running back. Doesn't matter if he's playing on the Arizona Cardinals with Joe Montana playing quarterback or if his quarterback is Ben Roethlisberger, Kyler Murray. It doesn't fucking matter who it is. It doesn't matter how the team plays. James Conner is just always that guy. He rushed for over 120 yards last week and a touchdown. He is a competent pass catching threat. This game does have the upside of being very high scoring, a true back and forth tit for tat affair here with the Detroit Lions. James Conner's been a top 8 running back in back-to-back weeks, so I am not going to bury him in my rankings. Final guy here inside of the slightly lower tier no-brainer running backs to close out the top 12 is Ramondre Stevenson, running back of the Patriots, going up against the New York Jumbo Jets. Now, the biggest downfall of the Jets defense is they can't stop the run. The run-stopping Jets defense just never shows up. Stevenson's been a top 12 back in back-to-back weeks, over 20 carries in both games, multiple targets in both games, and a touchdown in both games. This game reeks of being a snooze fest. We've talked about a couple of games here in today's video already that I really think are going to be super fun firefights, back and forth affairs, super high scoring, whereas this game feels like you might fucking fall asleep like your granddad on the couch trying to watch the game, right? Because at the end of the day, I love football. I'm going to be sitting there fired up to watch this game. But it's not the best of matchups. It's not the most exciting matchup, but it will provide 2 top 12 running backs in Breece Hall and Ramondre Stevenson. Moving now into the next tier, we got the fringe running back ones. Now, technically, these are the upper echelon running back number 2s, but these are also guys that if you said, Nick, I actually have Derrick Henry ranked as a top 12 running back, I'm not going to sit there in the comment section using it like a keyboard warrior battling back and forth with you. So we got Derrick Henry going up against the Cowboys in Jerry's world. Week 1, Derrick Henry looks slow. He looks sluggish. He looks basically obese, like he ate a bunch of Chinese food and his name was Eddie Lacy. Week 2, up against the Raiders, while they did lose that game and while they are now 0-2, he looked a lot better. 18 carries for 84 yards, 1 catch for 12 yards. Great for Derrick Henry, as he used to have fucking Butterfingers. 1 touchdown in back-to-back games. We know exactly what Derrick Henry is going to be. He's going to be a very safe running back 2 in good matchups. In bad matchups, he might end up shitting the bed like week 1 as the running back 34 when they have to use Justice Hill more. And in wet dream matchups, he might be a top 5 running back. So based upon where you drafted him, you're probably slightly disappointed. The matchup up against the Cowboys on paper should be incredibly rough. On paper, it's like the Cowboys defense is going with rock in rock, paper, scissors, and the Ravens are throwing paper out there because the offensive line sucks dick. But the Cowboys just got absolutely engulfed by I almost said Alexander Madison, by Alvin Kamara of the Saints last week. So again, on paper, the matchup knocks him down for being a top 12 running back, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he did so, considering the guy's just got a nose for the end zone. Next up, we got Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. I do not believe Kenneth Walker will end up playing. If Kenneth Walker does end up playing, then obviously you would just bump him up to this spot. As we talked about with the Dolphins defense, they cannot stop the run. It is honestly incredibly frustrating as a Dolphins fan. It makes me want to launch my fucking television out of the window like Morgan Wallen through that stool off the top of that bar. But Zach Charbonnet, he's got a great matchup, a wet dream matchup. The problem with Charbonnet is he's just not as good as Kenneth Walker. Last week, up against the Patriots, Kenneth Walker probably would have ripped off 23, maybe 25 fantasy points. Charbonnet gets 18. It was like Kenneth Walker light. If this was Kenneth Walker, we'd bump him up into that top 12 range. Since it's Zach Charbonnet, I'm not saying that the guy's not talented, but he's averaging 2.3 yards per carry. So I won't go ahead and give him the Suka Lamink special, the Hawk Tua, and spin on that thing, but I will rank Zach Charbonnet fairly. Final guy inside of the fringe RB1 tier is Rashad with 2 A's. White, limited in practice on Wednesday with the my groin. Now, I expect him to play on Sunday. If he doesn't play, I would be a little bit shocked, but that is something to monitor as Bucky Irving would move on up the rankings. Matchup up against the Denver Broncos is about as easy as it gets. Last week was a doozy because he ended up getting hurt, but this week I expect to be a lot better. Week 1 up against the Commanders, he scored 17 fantasy points. Rachaad White is the definition of inconsistency. You look up in the Webster's dictionary, just try to find, like, I guess you wouldn't type it in because it's a dictionary, so you got to scroll through the pages, try to find inefficient, and just a picture of Rachaad White is there. That's all that shows up. It doesn't even give you a definition, just a picture of Rachaad White. The guy's going to have fucking 2 to 3 yards per carry in the game, but he's going to catch 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 potential balls. The Broncos defense is trash. So despite Rachaad White being not very good, efficiency being bad, he's going to get a bunch of touches. Next up, we move into the high-end running back 2 range, to the mid-tier running back 2 range, and this is Tony Pollard, Travis Etienne, Kyren Williams, J.K. Dobbins, and Brian Robinson Jr. Tony Pollard kicks things off up against the Packers. Now, I, for one, thought this was going to be a 50-50 split between Pollard and Tajay Spears, and whoever ends up being the guy will end up being valuable for fantasy football, but in turn, it was never a 50-50 split. It is Tony Pollard season over here in Tennessee, and I expect that to continue. The Packers defense would be a 5-star matchup, GTA style, for a running back. Pollard has been a top 20 running back in back-to-back games. I view him as very consistent, and he looks like the polar opposite of what we saw for a majority of last season, and he also has 5 to 6 target upside, which definitely gives him a solid bump. Next up, we got ETN, back-to-back down performances, and frankly, the reason why I don't have ETN ranked higher, expert consensus rankings got him as a top 12 back, he's my running back 17, is because of the offense. The offense has not been able to get it up. The offense looks polar opposite to what we saw last season prior to the Trevor Lawrence injury. Last season, they were not stumbling and bumbling. They were after Lawrence got hurt, but they were percolating early on in the season. They were looking like one of the better offenses in the NFL, and now they look like they fell asleep at the driver's seat, right? They're behind the wheel and they're slumped over, they're sleeping. Running back 20 last week, and frankly, while I see the upside in the heart of the cards for Travis Etienne, I don't see him being as safe as I personally perceived to start off the season. For one, because they used Tank Bigsby a ton, and for two, because of the fact that the offense doesn't look that great. Now, the Bills' defense, I don't think is all that good against the run, so he should be fine, but I am lowering my expectations. Next up, we got Kyren. Now, Kyren is going to get fed like a fat kid at a buffet. The problem is the offensive line sucks more dong than Violet Myers, and without Puka, without Cooper Kupp, they're just not going to be able to move the ball. So a lot of these touches are going to be all for nothing. Now, I could definitely see him sneaking on into the end zone in garbage time, and anything could happen with Matthew Stafford. Maybe the 49ers fall asleep at the wheel, right? And the 49ers are able to score because of that. But ultimately, he's going to be fine. He should still be a top 24 back due to the amount of touches he gets. But you're going to need those targets to end up making him safe, because I don't like what I see out of the Rams offensive line. Next up, we got J.K. Dobbins, top five running back in back-to-back games, over 130 rushing yards in both games, and a touchdown in both games. The problemo here is the matchup. If he was going up against anyone, or mostly anyone, outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would be sitting here like the Ricola man on top of the mountain, Ricola, screaming that you need to start J.K. Dobbins. I would be screaming the J.K. Dobbins fucking mating call like I was a bird. But since he's going up against the Steelers, we need to turn the thing into reverse and back up a little bit. Now, we don't need to back all the way up. We don't need to do a full-on 180 and fucking turn the car into sport mode and drive away at 8,000 miles an hour, but we want to back up a little bit. We need to make our expectations lower, because if you set your expectations sky high like that sick Superman movie back in the day, or superhero movie, not Superman movie, then what's going to occur is you are going to be very disappointed. It's like when you go on a first date with a woman and you're setting your thoughts. You're like, oh, I'm going to get some Suka Lamink tonight. and then it doesn't end up happening, you don't get any spank and tickle, you're disappointed. So if you go into it thinking, hey, I'm expecting just to have fun, have a nice date, eat some nice dinner, and if you get the Sukulamink, it's a cherry on top. That's what you're expecting for Dobbins. The dinner is the 100+ yards. I think he'll get the 100+ yards, but the Sukulamink, the touchdown, might not come his way. So I'm definitely bumping him down the rankings, but he has the skills to break off a long run and take that thing to the crib. Final guy inside of the high-end running back twos is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. Top 24 back in back-to-back games. And while Eckler is definitely involved in this offense, and to pretend like Austin Eckler has zero involvement would be criminally insane. But saying that Austin Eckler isn't like a 50-50 split in terms of touches would just be a blatant lie. Brian Robinson's still getting around 3-4 targets a game, should be up around the 15 carry mark. Didn't score last week up against the Giants. If he had, he would have had a monster game. 17 rushes for 133 yards, 1 catch for 3 receiving yards. Matchup up against the Bengals on Monday Night Football is good enough for Brian Robinson. You're just hoping he finds that end zone to potentially crack the top 12. Next up, we move on in to the low-end running back twos. Now, this is the final tier before it becomes a complete and utter unmitigated disaster. And what I mean by that is this is the last tier where if I'm playing the guys, I feel confident in them. Meaning, sure, if you're down bad and you have to play the other guys, they could end up with a fine game, right? It's not like these guys are all schlubs. Most running backs in the NFL that are starters are pretty good and they're competent enough to have a good game. But once you get below these guys, things don't end up feeling as great. So my first low-end running back two would be Aaron Jones going up against the Houston Texans. Week 1, Aaron Jones has the sombrero on, a tug, over 100 all-purpose yards. Beautiful, up against the Giants. Week 2, I tell you guys, hey, we need to calm our titties a little bit here. Going up against the 49ers isn't going up against the Giants. The Giants' defense is not good. They have more holes than a fucking cheese grater, whereas the 49ers defense is a lot better. Now they're going up against the Texans, another solid defense, but the Vikings offense looks really good. Sam Darnold doesn't look like his old self. He's not seeing the ghost. He's seeing clearly now. 20/20 vision. So Aaron Jones, who's questionable this week, limited with a hip on Wednesday. I do believe it is not like a workhorse back role for Aaron Jones. They still do use Ty Chandler a ton, but the consistency should be there this week. He should be at minimum a top 24 running back. He has very solid receiving upside. He saw 6 targets last week. Aaron Jones isn't fully washed yet, averaging 5.5 yards per attempt. So while I won't put him in the high-end category of the running back twos due to the matchup, I do still like him a ton. Next up, we move to David Montgomery, and I say this all the time. I said it in the summer. I say it in all these videos, but David Montgomery is one of the safest running back twos you can have every single week. Why? Because the team loves to use him on the goal line. I'm pretty sure Dan Campbell has a fucking poster that he looks at before he goes to sleep of David Montgomery on his wall. The offensive line is a wall, and the Arizona Cardinals are not going to be able to break that wall down. David Montgomery is a shoo-in for a touchdown most weeks, so that makes him very safe. He also had 91 rushing yards in week 1 and had 4 targets last week. So David Montgomery is like wrapping that Trojan that directs around your squad. Then there is the upside. The Gibbs gets hurt, knock on wood. We don't root for injuries, but if that was to happen, Montgomery would absolutely dominate, fucking pink handcuff style. If Gibbs is healthy, Montgomery could also just steal all the touchdowns and score 2-3 touchdowns and have a huge game. So he's super safe with a lot of upside. A lot of people were saying he didn't have enough upside in the offseason, but we've seen 2 top 18 games already consistent with upside. Running back 13 last week, he could put that up again. He's got a great matchup against the Cardinals, but Gibbs is there, so he ends up as a low-end running back 2 every week, basically, in the rankings. Next up, we got Zach Moss going up against the Washington Commanders. Before, We talk more about Zach Moss, though. I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. If you are new to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code Notorious, you will receive a free pick like Aaron Rodgers higher than half of a total yard. You match that with any other pick from tonight's games on Thursday Night Football, the games on Sunday, the games on Monday, and you will receive 3 times what you put into the pick'em. If you add multiple picks, then the payout will obviously be higher. Now, if you're watching this past Thursday and you're like, Nick, Rodgers already played, you will actually receive just a different free pick for a different player. You will also receive a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So make sure you guys do check out Underdog Fantasy, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description for the free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000. So back to Zach Moss. He's the clear running back 1 over Chase Brown. I know a lot of people like Chase Brown this summer, me too, but I like Zach Moss better, and that felt correct. Now, has Zach Moss been a league winner? Has he been a fucking fearsome running back? No. Not like the defense sees Zach Moss and they're shaken, but they're the Commanders and they suck ass, so Zach Moss should have a good game. He was the running back 42 last week. Shout out to Jackie Robinson. This week, I do believe he will finish a lot higher. Reverse that around, top 24 back this week again because the matchup is so sweet. T. Higgins might return, and I just expect the Bengals offense to look a lot better going forward. I think this is a game script where they should be able to run late. Next up, we got Jerome Ford, F-150. Now, last week, we got kicked in the gonads starting Jerome Ford because the team didn't even use Jerome Ford correctly. They only gave him 44% of the snaps. Why? Why did they do that? Why did they do that? He was so effective. They used another running back who sucks donkey cock. Shout out Shrek, okay? Now, the guy's still averaging 5.7 yards per carry. Based upon what they saw last week against the Jaguars, they should give Jerome Ford that workhorse running back role that he had in week 1. So I'm not going to panic, full-on fucking mayday, terrible scenario, DEFCON 1. But, and this is a big but, shout out to Shakira, Jerome Ford, I'm still a little bit worried from what I saw last week, so I can't fully bump him up. You gotta pump it up. Final guy here inside the low-end RB2s is Cam Akers. Now, it appears that Mixon's not going to play. It appears that Dameon Pierce isn't going to play based upon the practice reports on Thursday. If you have Mixon, pick up Akers. Because without Dameon Pierce, without Joe Mixon, Cam Akers will be the lead guy. Now, I understand what you might be thinking. Nick, I have drafted Cam Akers before, and Cam Akers reeks to high heaven. Nick, Cam Akers can't play. I get that. But in preseason, Nick, it's just preseason. He looked good. And last week, he was averaging 4.6 yards per attempt. Fantasy football at the running back position heavily based upon volume. Volume is king in fantasy football. Bad running backs can put up big performances due to volume. Cam Akers plays on an offense that had Devin Singletary last season looking like prime LaDainian Tomlinson, not because he's amazing, not because he is even above average, because of the offense. When CJ Stroud is kicking down the door, FBI open up style, when CJ Stroud is hitting the defense with the teep kick every single play, it's going to open up for Cam Akers. Regardless of what you think of Cam Akers, if he is the lead back, I promise you, he will be a top 24 back. Final tier or penultimate tier here is the praying to the football gods for a touchdown. This is the tier where you need that touchdown for them to even be halfway useful. We begin with Najee Harris. Back-to-back 8-point performances. I guess technically 8 and 9-point performances. Not good. Not good. Najee's the clear guy. 17 plus rushes in both games. Can he get into the end zone? If he does and gets his 75, 70 yards, you're going to be happy. If he doesn't, you're getting 8 to 9 points. Next up, we got Zamir White. Week 1, he fumbles. They basically cast him aside. They cast him away. Shout out Wilson. Week 2, they give him more of the touches. He looks fine. Zamir White has not lived up to expectations. I still think he's a solid enough running back. They use Alexander Mattison too much for me to rank him way higher, but he's going up against the Panthers, so he should be fine. Javonte Williams up next. His usage has been concerning through 2 games, been very up and down with him and Jaleel McLaughlin. Much of the downfall for Javonte Williams isn't even necessarily himself, though he is only averaging 2.1 yards per attempt. It's mostly on the fact that Bonedix puts them in negative game script right off the rip. The guy's throwing the ball directly to the guys wearing the opposing jerseys. It's not good. So if the offense starts to get better, we'll be able to bump Javonte up. But with the questionable usage and the questionable offense, he can't be ranked higher. Chuba Hubbard up next, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Now, Chuba Hubbard might be saved. He might be saved by Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle savior himself. Though Chuba Hubbard isn't that great, neither is Andy Dalton. The matchup is fine, but I'm hesitant to put the crown back on Chuba Hubbard just yet. Next up, we got Swift. Now, on paper, Swift is the clear #1 running back on this team, which I didn't think was going to be the case. So I have been wrong this offseason on DeAndre Swift in terms of my take. But my take was also don't draft him because he's not very good. I did think the offensive line was going to be good, which they are not. They are terrible. The offense can't move the ball. The matchup against the Colts is great. Tony the Tiger style. The matchup is a wet dream. Josh Jacobs ran a train on them. You should be salivating thinking about it. The problem is the offensive line can't block. Caleb can't move the ball up the field. So if they're not ahead, they're going to have to pass. Now, he did have 5 targets last week. I think eventually he does shake it off and figure it out. Until Caleb starts doing something, I can't move him up in the tier ranking. Next up, we got Devin Singletary. Singletary finds the end zone last week against the Commanders in a great matchup. So he pays off in a great matchup. No one really all that surprised about it. Now he goes from a amazing matchup, a beautiful matchup, chef's kiss magnifique, to a matchup that is going to be incredibly rough, where he could get stuffed into a locker like he's in one of those movies that's based around being a kid in high school. Devin Singletary is fine. He's not above average running back. He's average. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry, which is good at all. The offensive line isn't absolutely atrocious, but they're not great either. I expect the Cleveland Browns defense to be suffocating in this game, so I can't move him higher than this. Next up, we got Austin Eckler. Now, Eckler has been a top 32 running back in both games. Saw 8 carries last week, 3 receptions for 47 yards. He's going to get around 3 to 4 targets every single game. If he's able to get 40-plus receiving yards like he has in both games, he's going to be fine. So he feels kind of safe, but then when you're actually investigating into things, you do a little bit of investigative research here, you'll find that he is averaging a lot of yards per reception. And if that just goes down slightly, which is really bumping him up, then he's going to have a not as hot day. Final guy here is Zeke. Now, it seems like Dowdle might be the guy, but it's not by a wide margin. I still think, though, Ezekiel Elliott has the better chance of scoring a touchdown, so that's why I'm going to put him up here. Final tier here, we got the down bad tier. Things are getting even worse than if you are in the praying for a touchdown tier. We got Jalen Warren. You might just get hit with Rico McMillan, Dowdle, and Alexander Mattison. Jalen Warren getting more ramped up in the offense. He's better than Najee Harris, but the team's never going to give him more carries than Najee Harris, so he's just stuck down here. Next up, we got Rico Dowdle. Hopefully, they push the offense into his hands, give him the key to Dallas, because if they do that, Dowdle could be a reliable top 24 back, but he's not there just yet. Final guy, Alexander Mattison, touchdown in back-to-back weeks. While the touches haven't really been there, put him here because he could score a touchdown. Now, my confusion is at a maximum on Carson Steele, Samaje Perine, Kareem Hunt. I will easily probably end up, you can follow the Patreon, $7.50 a month, link in the video description. I update these rankings on there. I'll probably end up putting those running backs maybe ahead of Madison, but I want to try to find as much information as possible on who the lead back might be before I do that. is kind of just a placeholder Madison, but if you have to start Madison, there are running backs worse just strictly because of the matchup, and I think he could definitely score. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Hit that like button down below. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. And again, make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Link in the video description to claim your free pick promo code Notorious plus a free first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.